Welcome to Fairy the Greyhound. On our way back from Dorset, we decided to spend a couple of nights in the New Forest. The New Forest is one of the largest remaining areas of heathland, pastureland and forest in southern England. It was proclaimed a royal forest by William the Conqueror and featured in the Domesday Book. We arrived here late, about 5 p.m, and we decided to stay in the pub car park. If you bought a meal, you got free camping for camper vans just behind the pub, which backed onto the forest. So we decided to eat in the pub. Fairy made herself comfortable. We brought her mat in for her and took a cushion off the sofa, and she laid there. After a night in the pub car park, the next morning we went for a cafe breakfast in the town of Lyndhurst. Then we headed off for Bolderwood Deer Sanctuary, where we hoped to see some fallow deer. Even if we couldn't see them, it was very likely that Fairy was able to smell them. Fairy is always on the lead, but obviously dogs had to be kept on the lead in this enclosure so that they didn't chase the deer. After a quick wee break, we headed out in search of the deer. On our way through the woods, we found this large fallen tree with huge roots exposed, which was very interesting to look at. Fairy, as always, was on high alert with her ears pricked. She loves walking in the woods. She saw some squirrels, rabbits, and when we did find the deer, she actually wasn't too bothered about them. We soon spotted a group through the trees, and they were laying down in the middle of a field, so we decided to walk round the other side of the field to see if we could get a closer look. We saw lots of lovely plants and wildlife on the way. I always like to stop to see what's growing in the woods. I don't know what this is called, but it was very pretty. When we got around the other side of the field, we were a lot closer to the deer, and zooming in on my camera, I could get some pretty good shots of them. They were all swishing their tails to keep the flies away. And there were a couple of New Forest ponies grazing with them too. The New Forest is famous for its wild ponies which roam around, and you'll see lots of them further on in the video. Fairy watched the deer through the fence, but she wasn't that excited by them. She didn't bark or whine like she does when she sees a squirrel. I'm sure if she saw one running fast, though, she'd be more interested and want to chase it. We then made our way to the Nightwood Oak trail, where we were looking forward to seeing the oldest oak tree in the New Forest. And on our drive, we saw lots of ponies wandering along the road. You quite often have to stop and let them cross. And then we arrived at the Knightwood Oak car park. This wasn't far from the deer sanctuary, just up the road, and we set off in search of the tree. To start off with, we found ourselves walking in the wrong direction, so we were coming across pine trees. So we turned around and headed back towards the oak tree wood, and you can see there with the fence around it, that is the oldest oak tree in the New Forest. This tree is known as the Queen of the Forest and is over 500 years old, believed to have been planted in the 1600s. This tree is still going strong and is an excellent example of the ancient pollarding method, where the tree is pruned to prolong its life. This tree measures nearly 8 metres around its trunk. After looking at the tree, we headed to find our campsite. We were going to stay at a campsite called Long Beach, which was a very basic campsite with no toilets or showers. You had to take your own porta toilet with you in your camper van or motorhome. It just had water taps and waste bins. We stopped to look at the wild ponies on the way. We saw lots of herds as we drove along this part of the road. And we even had to stop for some donkeys as we drove towards one of the towns. It was causing a big tailback of traffic waiting to pass. Eventually we arrived at Long Beach, which is a woodland campsite. The ponies roam wild around this campsite, but it is very basic. You pick your own pitch. You can park anywhere you like. So I decided to park the van here under this large oak tree. It was a very quiet, peaceful campsite where you could just sit and relax and listen to the sound of the birds. And what I really like when I'm in the van is looking out every window and seeing the trees. And when I have my van roof up and it has both the side and the front windows, I can see trees all around when I'm laying in bed. So after Fairy'd had her dinner, she went to sleep and I just lay on the bed listening to the birds and looking at the trees. It was very peaceful and very relaxing. Fairy slept for quite a while under her cosy blankets. And then after a while, she was startled by something and sat up, looking very alert. I'm not sure what she'd spotted, but she seemed very excited by it. You can see by the look on her face, her ears are pricked up. So I had a look outside the van to see what she had spotted. And there were squirrels playing right by the big tree that we were parked next to. So just outside the door of our van. I was a little bit worried that Fairy might just jump out the van door because it was open and go and catch one of the squirrels. But she didn't. She just laid on the bed, staring at them very intently. Suppose like a big television screen for a dog looking out into the woods.
Can you see? What can you see, Peppa?
After we'd watched the squirrel for a while, we decided to go for a walk. So we walked down the road through the campsite, and here you can see the other campers dotted around the place. There are lots of lovely dog-friendly campsites down in the New Forest, and luckily it's very local to us. It's only 2 hours from home, so we could just pop down here for a weekend away if we wanted to. Fairy's a very adventurous greyhound. She loves exploring. She loves going to new places on new walks, especially in the forest or the woods. And she loves sleeping in the camper van. The New Forest has more than 140 miles of hiking and cycling tracks through the woods. You can access these tracks straight from the campsite and from many of the campsites in the New Forest. They're all straight on out onto the paths, and the paths are numbered so you can't get lost. They all interlink with each other. It's a great place to come with the dog if you like dog walking. Peaceful, quiet tracks, lots of wildlife to see. The New Forest is a great place to visit. I've never tried it, but I did wonder if I rode my mountain bike along these tracks, if I could lead Fairy alongside and she could run along beside the bike. Not quite sure how that would go if she saw a squirrel, but I might try it one day. After about an hour of walking, we came out of the forest to an area called Janesmore Pond, and this was on the road where the campsite was. So we then walked back along the road and back in the entrance of the campsite. And at Janesmore Pond, we saw some cattle grazing, lots of cows roaming wild as well as the ponies in this area. We saw lots of lovely ponies grazing by Janesmore Pond. I think they gather here because there's water to drink, and as its weather is warming up, you can see the flies around this pony. They do tend to stay where they know they have water. They also like to be on the open grassy areas where they can graze rather than in the forest. So if you're driving in the New Forest, you do need to drive very slowly and carefully because you will need to make regular stops to let the ponies cross. Some of them just stand in the middle of the road too. We even saw some donkeys grazing here. And then we turned back in to the entrance to the campsite, and this is the road leading down to the campsite. You can see more ponies grazing down here too. They really do get everywhere. Sometimes you wake up, if you're in a tent, open up your tent and find a pony grazing right next to it. And the campsite sign does state that you need your own chemical toilet if you want to stay at this campsite. So when we got back to the van, I got my jet boil out, and there are taps on this campsite so we could get water. And I boiled up Fairy's chicken breasts in a pan over the jet boil. It did take quite a while to cook, but I didn't bring a big stove with me on this trip. Obviously, Princess Fairy just slept on her double bed in the van, whilst I, her slave, cooked her chicken outside. It's nice though that I was cooking it in the sun and the warm weather for a change, rather than the pouring rain as on the last few trips to Wales.
Dinner. Wee wee. wee-wees. You want to go for wee-wees? You want to go for wee-wees? You want to go for a walk? Come on then. Come on in. Come on. Go for a walk. Walkies. Walkies. Want to go for a walk? Want to go for bedtime wee-wees? Fairy? Come on.
As it started to get later, I turned the fairy lights on in the van. Makes it feel lovely and cosy in here. And Fairy put her pyjamas on and got snuggled in for the night. We woke up to another lovely sunny day the next morning, and Fairy got up to look out the window because I think she could see some squirrels running around out there. I get lots of lovely doggy smeary nose prints on my window.
Squirrels? Can you see squirrels?
I hope you've enjoyed watching our trip to the New Forest. Thank you to all my subscribers. Thanks for your comments. If you haven't yet subscribed, please click the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you don't miss any more of our adventures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.